Mr. Mahiya, welcome to 263 Chat. It's good to have you on the program. Maybe just in brief, we have the independent complaints mechanism that came up recently. May you just kindly let us know what it is, where we are coming from with it, and where are we today?
Oh, thank you. The Constitution of Zimbabwe, which was adopted in 2013, has section 210 of that constitution, which provides for an act of parliament to be put in place to provide an effective and independent mechanism for receiving investigations and investigating complaints from members of the public about misconduct on the part of members of the security services, and for remedying any harm caused by this misconduct. So that provides for the creation of a commission, an independent complaints mechanism that ordinary citizens can put their complaints to if they have seen or have experienced misconduct or have been harmed by the members of the security forces. Mm-hmm. And so it is provided for in the Constitution. So in 2015, with the support of Veritas, we approached the Constitutional Court, of course with the advocate Tendai is our lawyer, and our plea before the court was that the Constitutional Court needs to compel the state to put in place this an act of parliament that provides for the setting up of this complaints mechanism. The motivation for us to do that was largely because we've supported a number of victims of political violence in Zimbabwe, and these victims of violence have, in many of the cases, found themselves victimized when they reported their cases to the police, and a number of security services personnel were involved in the violations that took place. The first complainant, Hilton Shironga, is a survivor of political violence whom we've worked with from Chueshe, who survived gunshots during the 2008 violence. So our plea before the court was that since the Constitution provides for that mechanism so that citizens can approach that constitutional mechanism, there was need for the state to be compelled to put that in place. But that is 2015, and the ruling only came the past 2 weeks in 2020. There was a delay. But what is important for us is that the court agreed with us that the complaints mechanism had to be set up, that it was important that the Constitution protects citizens. It was important that therefore that the state be compelled to put the complaints mechanism in place. Of course, a number of events have taken place since our appeal to the court and the passing of the judgment. You know, you look at what happened in 2017, the military coup that took place. You know, you look at what happened in 2018, 2019, January, the civilians that were shot, the civilians that were shot in cold blood in Harare. Look at 2019, 2020, January. You look at all the violations that have taken place that were used or done by members of the security forces. So you need, because those took place before the ruling had been made and before the law is in place, we cannot use the section, that part of the Constitution yet, right? So we were denied of that opportunity as citizens to use that as part of the Constitution. So we think, of course, because they've been given about 45 days for them to set it up, to have an act of parliament, I think it is important. It's a victory for the citizens. It's a victory for constitutionalism in Zimbabwe. It's a victory for accountability, because we want people to be held to account. People need to be held to account. The institutions need to be held to account. And because of the militarization of the state in Zimbabwe, we need to make sure that the citizens can get justice, and that this mechanism should be able to provide that. Of course, we understand there are a number of challenges that will come with it. The implementation itself, because of the court has given them time, or the composition of the complaints mechanism. In our application, we obviously knew that there will be challenges in terms of the actual implementation. But the fact that there is that ruling, the fact that it is provided for in the Constitution, it means that we are going to participate in the process and ensure that the victims of violence, citizens, are going to participate in the process of the making of this law, and who makes it up, and what roles and responsibilities it has. Of course, those are the finer details that we want to deal with. But we are happy that the Constitution has been given effect. We are happy that the Constitution has been given life. We are happy that people are going to be held to account. We are happy that citizens will have an opportunity to hold security forces to account individually and, of course, as an institution. And for us, it's important.
All right, fine. Let me take you back to the fact that it took 4 years for it to come into force. Why is that so? What was happening between then and now?
Of course, we approached the Constitutional Court and we do not understand why it took so long. But what I can clearly outline is that there, of course, a lot was lost, right, in the period of the delay. A lot happened that needed this law to be in place. And of course, citizens and constitutionalism lost in the process because it took far longer than we expected. Secondly, I think the argument of the defense was that there was no time frame that was given for the setting up of the complaints mechanism, right? But our argument was that if the constitution is in place, it just needs to be given effect as early as possible. So we think maybe the argument was the court was trying to give them an opportunity to set it up in the period before the ruling was made. And that's the assumption that we make. But anyway, it took too long, we think, and it has adversely affected citizens' access to their freedoms, citizens' access to constitution and the constitutionalism. And we think it was adverse, but it is important that we now have it, and we need to push to make sure that it is implemented.
Okay, you mentioned that issues like the 2018 post-election violence, you look at the 2019 general violence as well, those will not be affected by this.
We're saying we missed an opportunity, because if they had been in place already, if the commission had been in place already, people would have actually been able to go there exactly and report their cases. So I think maybe once it's set up, people will be able to go and put their cases and report their cases before it.
And then in the past, we've had, like you rightly mentioned, the issue of implementation. And now we've got this whole deadline set, the November 9th deadline. What happens now? What are the implications of them missing that deadline if they don't set it up by then?
I think if they do that, they'll be in contempt of the court, because the court is clearly given them time. And I think the assumption was that they were already given time by the delay in giving the judgment, right? So I don't think they were given 45 days. They were given 4 years and 45 days, in as far as we're concerned. And I think it's enough time for them to be able to set it up. But what is important for us is that ruling has been made, that the Constitution has been given life, and we have a responsibility to make sure that citizens participate in the making of this law. Not only participate in the making of the law, but make sure that citizens are aware of this mechanism and we hold it to account and it's accountable. Right. So I think that's what's important now in as far as we're concerned, because the ruling has been made, it's positive, it is in the interest of justice, it's in the interest of accountability, it is in the interest of constitution and constitutional, in the rule of law and constitutionalism, and because of that, we think it is important that we make sure that it is given effect. Of course, we've had problems with the implementation of the Constitution. We were fighting issues around the implementation of the Constitution. We've seen an attempt by the state and the ruling party to amend the Constitution even before it has been fully implemented. We went on a campaign as a civil society and as Zimbabwe and the broader civil society, trying to campaign against the amendment of the Constitution, Constitution Amendment number 2, and we're fighting against it because we're saying you need to implement the Constitution first before you amend it. Implement the Constitution and then amend it. But now you see, so this is part of the broader campaign to push for the implementation of the Constitution. Because our appreciation as civil society is that we fought for a new Constitution. If you go back to the history of the constitutional movement, go back to the formation of the NCA, come to the present, right? So if you go there, you realize that we as civil society were saying the greater problem that we have in Zimbabwe is the issue of constitution and constitutionalism. This is the reason why we've got the problems in governance and democracy, because we've got a default constitution, right? So it's part of the movement, it's part of the effort to build a culture of constitution and constitutionalism. So this is the reason why we are pushing it. The constitution, now that we have got a constitution, we've improved the Bill of Rights and a lot of many other provisions, including Section 210 of the Constitution, it has to be implemented. And where the state fails to implement, we as the citizens and civil society are going to put pressure on it, to advocacy work, to litigation on it, to make sure that the Constitution is implemented. And we have a responsibility to do that. And when these institutions are in place, we make sure that they are held to account. So the idea is to need to follow up, make sure that people are held to account. Until if people believe in a constitution and constitutionalism, they'll follow it. If they don't, they'll have to tear the constitution down. And we will put in pressure so that they choose. The state chooses, and we think they will choose to follow the constitution. If they don't, we'll hold them to account.
Okay, there's the issue of awareness to the people. Like you were saying that you had to fight for constitutional amendment number 2. Now we have this. It's a very important provision for the citizen, right? But how are you going to ensure that the ordinary people, let's say in Khayelitsha somewhere, they know about this? They know, because this is one of their rights. They're entitled to this.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of cases that happen out there, but most of them they do not know the channels to follow. How are you going to ensure that those people are made aware with this?
I think the first advantage that we have is that this is an issue that is close to people's lived realities, especially if you go to political processes like elections, right? People know the partisan nature of our security forces, and people have experienced it every day. You have experienced the police partisan nature, the partisan nature of the police, of the military. They've experienced it in their everyday life. And I think what they were asking themselves is, how do we hold these people to account, right? Who do we report to? So people go to a police station and report, and then they're arrested. So people have these lived realities, and they were trying to understand what is the answer to it. So we think the people that made the Constitution, those that wrote the Constitution, we are aware and alive of this reality. So what am I saying? What I'm saying is that the lived realities of our citizens makes it easier and more acceptable for the citizens for when we do our outreach and inform them, because I think this was a gap that they wanted to be answered. So obviously, what are we going to do? One, we will do the usual public meetings to engage with our communities. We'll use social media to make sure that citizens are informed. We're going to use radios, all forms of media that accesses communities so that communities are aware. And I think that is important. It is important because it will be able to hold these people to account. Because you see, what has happened that we work in rural communities, right? And you know that the important role that the security forces have played in the access to food, access to land. You know, it's a militarized system. Even local government is militarized. So we realize that citizens have always asked, who do we go to? Who do we report to? And this mechanism comes in as a solution. But of course we understand there's limitations. Mm-hmm. It's operating in an environment which is broadly militarized. It's operating in an environment where nothing has really changed per se. But the reason why we push it and we continuously push is that we push for constitution and constitutionalism, the rule of law, and we hope that citizens will be protected that way.
Okay, speaking about the politicization of the military, because I was going to come to that. We had the Motlanthe Commission, which compelled police officers who took part in that war shooting to be arrested or something like that. But nothing has been done up until today. And you have got this provision now that's coming in place, and it compels police officers to be held to account for their actions. Don't you think maybe we're going to see police protection from the political elites?
Yes. Like I said, the environment has not changed. There are a lot of fears that we have. But the good thing is that it's not just a temporary commission that has been put in place by the president using his presidential powers that will eventually fizzle out, right, like the Motlanthe Commission. This is a commission, this is a mechanism that is provided for in the constitutions.
So it's more like, let's say, the Human Rights Commission,
yes.
Gender Commission?
Yes, because it's a mechanism that's put in place and it's in the constitution. Right? It's not a Chapter 12 commission, but it's a mechanism that's provided for, right? So that's a good thing. So our fears, we all have those fears, but we want to be proactive and look at the brighter side of it. The brighter side of it is that if it is provided for in the Constitution and is already there, and if you put your complaints to this commission, you expect them to feedback. because they have a responsibility, a constitutional responsibility to feedback, right? If they don't, everything is on record, right? Because we need to appreciate that we might not get the answers immediately as we want them. But what is important is to put things officially on record. So that mechanism should be there to put things officially on record. So if you make a report, it should be on record. It should be given details, and then people should be able to follow up. So it puts enough pressure on the state. It puts enough pressure on the security forces, because now they realize they have a constitutional obligation to report back. They have a constitutional obligation. And this is an independent mechanism. Of course, we understand. If you're going to deal with issues of security, it might not be as independent as you want it, because you're going to have ex-military people in it. You're going to have people that obviously follow the command. We understand how things
work. Attachments to that.
Attachment to that, right? And who makes it up are some of the issues that will be raised. But what is important for us strategically is that you have a mechanism, which is in the Constitution, is put in place. You've got a body that you go to with your complaints. You have a copy of the complaints that you've made. You can make follow-up, and if they don't perform their duties, you have a court to go to. There's always a pressure that you can put on the state and on the commission. So it's important.
Okay, I hear where you're coming from about putting pressure, etc. But let's look at what's been happening right now. We've got abductions, torture that's been happening. There's a lot of pressure that has been put on the state to investigate, especially the most recent one, the abduction of is it Tawanda Mahiya?
Yes.
Yeah. So that pressure, the government seems to have absorbed that pressure, and now that pressure from the citizenry has just fizzled out. And so how is this going to be different from the kind of pressure that we have seen before from the citizens?
Yeah, it might not necessarily be different, but it adds another layer, right? It adds another layer where there is a specific office, a specific commission of some sort, right? That you walk into and you make a complaint. That's point number one. And number two, it should have the obligation, I think, whichever way it is set up, to feedback, right? And it should be able to respond. I think it should be able to report to Parliament. I don't know who it reports to yet, because we don't know, it's not very clear, just they should be set up. But if it's set up as an act of Parliament, I think then they have to report to Parliament, right? So obviously then they report to Parliament, if that's the case. So what is different is that it's not your Motlandi Commission, where the president comes, uses his powers to appoint a commission, and it's not followed up. So when it reports to Parliament, if it reports to Parliament, then obviously parliamentarians are elected. They are representatives of the citizens, isn't it? So therefore, there's a way of holding them to account. And that's how we would want it to be, so that we're able to hold them to account. It's a slow process. Okay, let me put it this way. It's not a microwave. It's not your quickly, we are going to do it, right, and achieve the results. It's incremental. So constitutionalism is what we are trying to, culture of constitutionalism is what we are trying to calculate in the state. Accountability. They have to account to someone. And that's what matters, and that's important. Because now they don't account to anyone. You go to the police, you look at what was happening to Mcheshiwa's case in Blair. Even in those ladies that were beaten in Blair, remember, the same person who has beaten you at the police station is the same person who's recording the statements, and you are reporting your complaint to the same person who's violating
to
the perpetrator. And that creates a lot of unnecessary challenges, the re-victimization of the victim, the trauma that comes with it, and the fact that people might not necessarily be held to account. So of course, it moves you away from the hierarchy of the military, right, into an independent mechanism, right. So what that does is that there is no following the hierarchy of the military. That's our understanding and how it should be. So when that happens, then people are not obligated or not driven by the command structure of a military setup. Right, and we're saying this is important for citizens to feel free. Citizens need to feel free, because fear is a factor in Zimbabwe. People are fearful of the state. People are fearful of the state because of the role that the security forces have played. Right, so we need to get a sense that there's somewhere that we can go. Of course, if that doesn't happen, that doesn't work, we go back to the court, right? If they're not following the constitution, we go to the court. If that doesn't provide results, we go to the region, right? We are doing a lot of work as civil society, regional advocacy, we're going to African Union. We will try all avenues, peaceful avenues that seek to hold the state to account, that seek to hold security forces, because these guys have the responsibility to protect citizens. And if you appreciate the role of the military, the role of the security, that's why the state has got a monopoly of violence. That's why you can't have your own army. I can't have my own army. We've got a national army. We've got a national police force, isn't it? So the state is that monopoly of violence, so that they are able to protect all citizens. Because the number one political good that the state has to do is providing security for citizens, right? So imagine what happens when the state fails to do so, and yet it has got a monopoly of violence. There should be a mechanism that holds the state to account, and explains why we celebrate this as a victory for the citizens and a victory for constitutionalism. We may not get quick results immediately, but documentation will take place. And at one time or another, 20, 50 years from now, people will be held accountable if they are not held accountable today.
Okay, maybe lastly, let's come to what's been happening, especially in the last two months. We've had a very shrinking democratic space in Zimbabwe, where we've seen a lot of abductions, torture, arbitrary arrests of opposition parties. What's your comment on this as here in Zimbabwe?
Yes. As here in Zimbabwe, I think our position is very clear. The Constitution provides a wide array of liberties, a wide array of, should be section 4 of the Constitution, a wide array of liberties and freedoms, right? Rights that citizens have, and those have to be respected. And that is the basis that a democratic society is built on the respect of the rights of citizens and the respect of there has to be a law, a supreme law of the land that people respect. And you cannot build a peaceful society if that society has no rule of law, if that society does not is in an unjust respects or promotes unjust laws, right? You cannot have peace in an environment of injustice. You cannot have peace in a militarized environment, right? So our position is that. So that's why you look at all these violations. You look at now we have got the president of Zimbabwe. He's been incarcerated for demanding the rights, right? So that Impala car rental should just be able to assist the court with information on who rented the car that was abducting people. Look at Joanna Mamombi now as we speak. So we can't sit and say, let's talk about peace. Peace. When we talk about peace, we can't talk about the rights and justice, rights or citizens and the justice. We can't. That is negative peace. So as in Zimbabwe, we're talking about positive peace, sustainable peace. Sustainable peace can only come where citizens' rights are respected, where citizens have access to socio-economic and political rights. It's not just about the political rights, even economic rights. We have been reporting in Zimbabwe violations that are taking place in rural communities. Women and older people are denied food aid on the basis of their political affiliation, and yet there's a drought and there's COVID. You cannot build a society, a peaceful society, if you deny that society of justice. So we're very clear as Zimbabwe that we need to have a peaceful society that respects the rights of citizens. But for us to do so, Zimbabwe needs to go to a platform, a space where we've got a national dialogue, a genuine national dialogue, because we appreciate that there are many factors and many parties to this conflict that Zimbabwe has. And you see, we have got citizens on one side, we've got the state on one side. You see, and the social contract is broken down. The social contract, the relation between the state and the citizens, it is broken down. Citizens have zero trust of the state. In fact, if you look at what is happening in Zimbabwe, citizens are trying as much as they can to live outside the state. The state provides social services like education. What's happening now? You're providing your own education to your own children now, right? Health, people are trying to find alternatives. Where can I get my source of for health, isn't it? They go to private, some go to traditional healers, what they can afford. Outside this, yet it is the responsibility of the state to provide those services. So when that breaks down, when the social service, the capacity, ability of the state to provide those services breaks down, trust breaks down. Citizens have no responsibility, moral obligation to respect the state. And when that happens, and people have no moral obligation to respect the state and find alternatives outside the state, then there's a problem. Because they have no moral obligation to pay taxes to that same state. And when they don't pay taxes to that state, either because they're incapable of doing so because they don't have any income, or because they are rebelling against paying taxes to a state that is not providing services, then the social contract is broken. And when the social contract is broken, then you do not have peace, right? Because citizens are agitated. That's when you find the police are at every corner in every state. When they say there's a stairway, you have more police on the streets than the citizens themselves. The state is living in fear of the citizens. So Zimbabwe is captured by fear. You've got citizens that are fearful of the state. You've got the state that is fearful of the citizens. So we are a nation that's captured by fear. A nation captured by fear cannot progress. You cannot innovate. You cannot engage economically in an environment where fear holds you hostage. This is the reason why we say as Heal Zimbabwe. For us to heal this country called Zimbabwe, we need to accept these realities. That we have the responsibility as citizens, we have the responsibility as Zimbabweans to sit on a table together and say, what are our problems? What is the national question? What is the national problem that we need to deal with? And then people remove these jackets that they carry. The jackets that they carry from the liberation struggle, the jackets that they carry as opposition, and say, as Zimbabweans, how do we move forward? How do we heal this country? What are our problems? And we've identified the problems. We've got economic issues, we've got the economic issues, the real issues, the bread and butter issues that people can't put food on the table. And that you cannot have a peaceful society when people can't feed themselves. You are creating a culture of crime, you are creating a culture of all the vices that the society can have, right? You have political problems where there's polarization in this country. This polarization stems from them and us. We label each other. We can't sit at the table and discuss national issues without saying, thieves. But as Zimbabwe we're saying, we also have social issues that are coming. We've got security issues, right? The security crisis, people don't trust the security, don't trust the police, they don't trust the state, right? And we're saying, for us to move forward, people talk about sanctions, right? The state, the ruling party talks about sanctions. The other side doesn't acknowledge the sanctions, or even if they do. So why can't we sit at a table in Zimbabwe, civil society, the church, everyone else, and say, okay, what is our problem? If someone says we've got sanctions, why do we have sanctions? How do we deal with them? What are the conditions that have been put in place for us to deal with this? If we say democracy and governance, we have got a constitution, we say we're a democratic state, the president, the current president said this is the Second Republic. So if it is the Second Republic, it's obviously a democratic republic. So then obviously it means there is an aspiration to live in a democratic, so isn't it? So what is the point? Here's Zimbabwe's message is that we need to heal this country. We can't move forward. But for us to move forward, we need to accept that we're in a crisis, that we've got a conflict that we need to deal with. Let's identify the root cause of the conflict. And the root cause of the conflict is that we are living in fear as a nation. And we need to deal with that fear. How do we exercise this fear? Exercise this fear by being honest with each other and sitting down and saying the state has lost its responsibility, it has lost the moral obligation to provide the services that it's supposed to provide. Citizens no longer trust the state. And if the citizens don't trust the state has the responsibility to make sure that citizens come together and we redefine the social contract. So we need to redefine that.
Okay, I know I said lastly, but I think I couldn't just ignore this. I could see you're moving with Sustainable Development Goal number 16, which talks about building peace, justice, and strong institutions. And now we've got the independent complaints mechanism, which is one of the things that probably entails that we've got a just society. Yeah. Do you think maybe with this and with where Zimbabwe is headed, we might be able to meet SDG number 16?
It's a tall order to meet SDG number 16, but it's aspirational. That's what's important, and it's up there for us to seek to have it, right, and achieve it. I don't think we can entirely achieve it, right? I don't think there's no state or no nation that can entirely say we've 100% achieved it, because we're dealing with building institutions. Institutions get strong and are built over time, where the confidence that people have in the institutions and the professionalism in those institutions, especially if you look what is happening now, people have no confidence in the judiciary, they have no confidence in any aspect of the executive. People have lost confidence in these institutions. So we need to restore, strengthen these institutions for people for the development, for us to achieve the development goal number 16, right? And I think it's SDG number 16 central. It's a central goal. It creates the environment, right? If we want to build inclusive society, we are very exclusionary society, right? We're not a very exclusionary society. We say that you or me, this and that, we label each other, and we need to build institutions. We need to create a sense that we need to be tolerant of diverse views. In Zimbabwe, we're not. If your opposition is to be decimated, if you're civil society, you're called terrorists, and the head of state goes on national television and labels citizens as terrorists, bad apples that have to be flushed out. It's even the language. But the message that we've continuously put across in Zimbabwe is that the problem is also in the institutions and the fact that we do not have a strong national peace and reconciliation process. Right? So we are being led by a group of traumatized people that fought in the liberation struggle. You see, nothing was that other than rewarding them with the positions and money and big cars. That's why they want those big cars, right? And the money, and because the trauma that they experienced during the war, after the trauma, they just go back, live in positions and the money. So that's not how you rehabilitate people. You need to deal with the trauma, the soul, the psychological end of a human being, the spiritual end of the human being. So what is the point that we're making? The point that we're making is that for Zimbabwe to heal, we need to deal with the past. Because the people that are leading us now, that are in government, were children when they went to war. So these are like child soldiers that are now in positions of authority and in control of the state. So what they consider the norm is not the norm. You look at what they did to each other in Mozambique. They would just kill each other. Right? You're an enemy, you are killed. If you read a lot of the literature of what happened during the war. What also happened to them from the Smith regime. Right? So until we deal with the past. So it's Zimbabwe we're advocating for. Deal with the past. Sit down. What are the issues? The National Peace and Reconciliation Commission needs to be strengthened. It needs to be reinforced so that we deal with the past. We deal with the Gokra wound. We deal with the war of liberation issues. We deal with all conflicts that are from the past, 2008 violence, the land issue. We deal with those issues that are holding us captive and hostage. The past is holding us hostage, and the past is a representation, a symbolism of fear. So we're held hostage by fear. That's why we can't move forward. So we need to deal with that.
For these and other stories, visit our website www.263chat.com. Follow us on Twitter @263chat and like our Facebook page 263chat.